The auditorium lights blazed down on the stage where 10-year-old Marcus Williams stood clutching a crumpled flyer. His worn sneakers squeaked against the polished floor. Around him, kids in designer outfits warmed up with vocal coaches hovering nearby. Marcus had come alone. The flyer promised a grand prize of $75,000. His mother needed $68,000 for the surgery that would save her life. He'd done the math 100 times. This was their only shot. At the registration table, a woman with sharp cheekbones and perfectly manicured nails looked up from her laptop. Her name tag read Victoria Chun, Program Director. She took one look at Marcus, and her expression shifted from neutral to dismissive. The boy wore a faded hoodie with a stretched-out collar and jeans with patches on the knees. Victoria's gaze lingered on his shoes, the kind you get from donation bins. She set down her pen with deliberate slowness. "Registration closed an hour ago," she said, her voice clipped and final. Marcus swallowed hard. "The flyer says registration until 6. It's 5:45. He placed the flyer on the desk, smoothing out the wrinkles with careful fingers. Victoria barely glanced at it. She leaned back in her chair and crossed her arms. "Even if I wanted to help you, the entry fee is $200, cash or card only. No exceptions." The boy reached into his backpack and pulled out a shoebox. It was battered and held together with rubber bands. Victoria's eyebrow arched in amusement. Marcus removed the rubber bands and lifted the lid. Inside were stacks of bills, crumpled and smoothed out again, held together with paper clips. Quarters filled a plastic bag. Dimes and nickels rattled in another. He began counting it out on the desk, his small hands moving with practiced precision. Victoria's amusement turned to disgust. She pushed back from the desk as if the money might contaminate her. "Where did you get this?" Her voice carried across the lobby, drawing attention from nearby parents. Marcus kept counting. "I earned it. Mowed lawns, washed cars, walked dogs. Took me a year." His voice was steady, but his hands trembled slightly. Victoria leaned forward, lowering her voice to a harsh whisper. "Listen carefully. This program is for trained vocalists with professional experience. It's not a charity case for kids who need lunch money." "I can sing," Marcus said quietly. "I'm sure you can sing in the shower. But this is different. These children have been training since they were 5 years old. They have private coaches and performance experience. What do you have?" Victoria gestured at the pile of change on her desk. "A shoebox of dirty money and a dream." "That's not enough." Marcus looked her straight in the eye. "My mom is dying. Stage 4 cancer. The surgery costs $68,000. If I don't win this, she won't make it to Christmas." The words came out flat, factual, like he'd rehearsed them in the mirror until they stopped hurting to say. Victoria's face tightened. For a moment something flickered in her expression. Then it hardened again. "That's very unfortunate. But manipulating me with a sob story won't change the standards of this program." Behind Victoria, a door opened. A man emerged from the back offices, tall and lean, with graying temples and dark, intelligent eyes. He wore an expensive leather jacket and moved with the easy confidence of someone used to being recognized. This was James Rivers, the celebrity music producer serving as guest judge. He'd produced platinum albums and launched careers. His face was known to millions. But Marcus didn't recognize him. The boy only had eyes for Victoria and the registration form still sitting on the desk between them. James had been about to walk past, phone in hand, mind on the schedule. But something made him stop. Maybe it was the tension in the air. Maybe it was the sight of a child standing alone against an adult's contempt. Or maybe it was the boy's face, the angle of his jaw, the shape of his eyes, something hauntingly familiar that made James's breath catch in his throat. He moved closer, his footsteps silent on the carpet. "What's going on here?" Victoria straightened, her professional smile snapping into place. "Mr. Rivers, just handling a late registration. Nothing to concern yourself with." But James wasn't looking at her. He was staring at Marcus. The boy's face was a mirror of his own from 30 years ago. The same dark eyes, the same defiant set to the chin. Even the way he stood, shoulders squared, despite being outsized and outmatched. James felt the room tilt. "What's your name?" His voice came out rougher than intended. "Marcus Williams, sir." Williams, not Rivers. Of course not. James had left before the boy was born, had signed away his rights, had convinced himself it was the noble thing to do. He'd been 22 and on the verge of his first record deal. A baby would ruin everything, he'd told himself. Sarah had cried and begged, but he'd walked away. That was 10 years ago. He'd never looked back, had built an empire on the foundation of that choice. And now here was his son, standing in front of him with a shoebox full of change, begging for a chance James had denied him from birth. "How old are you, Marcus?" 10, sir." The math aligned perfectly. James felt sick. He forced himself to focus on Victoria. What's the problem with his registration? Victoria's smile grew strained. "The entry fee is $200. He's attempting to pay with," she gestured at the pile with distaste, "whatever this is. I was explaining that our program maintains certain standards." James looked at the money on the desk. Singles, fives, a few tens, quarters and dimes catching the overhead lights. Every dollar representing hours of work from a 10-year-old child. His 10-year-old child. The son he'd abandoned because a baby didn't fit his 5-year plan. James reached for his wallet. "How much is he short?" "Mr. Rivers, that's not necessary." "How much?" Victoria's jaw tightened. "He hasn't finished counting yet, but that's not the point. The point is," James pulled out $300 bills and placed them on the desk. "Register him. Give him whatever time slot is left, and return his money to him." He looked at Marcus. "You earned this. Keep it. Buy yourself something nice." Marcus stared at the crisp bills like they were a magic trick. "I can't take that, sir. I need to pay my own way." The boy's pride cut through James like a blade. This child, his child, had more integrity at 10 than James had possessed at 22. "Consider it a sponsorship, then. Every artist needs a patron." James turned back to Victoria. "Register him now, and if there's any issue with his participation, you'll answer to me personally." Victoria's face flushed red, but she pulled out a registration form. Her pen scratched across the paper with barely controlled anger. Marcus gathered his money back into the shoebox, moving slowly like he was afraid this might be a dream that could shatter. James watched him, memorizing details. The boy's hands were calloused from yard work. His fingernails had dirt under them. His clothes were clean, but worn thin from too many washings. This was what James's choice had created, a child who had to work like an adult while other kids played. "You're all set," Victoria said through gritted teeth. "Preliminary round is tonight at 7. You're performing last." Marcus nodded and carefully tucked the registration paper into his backpack. He looked up at James with an expression of pure gratitude. "Thank you, sir. I won't let you down." The boy had no idea who he was talking to. No idea that the man who'd just saved his registration was the same man who'd condemned him to this life. James's throat closed up. "What are you singing?" "Stand Up? It's a gospel song my mom used to sing. Used to, past tense, because she was too sick now." James knew that song. It was about rising above oppression, about finding strength and faith. "That's a good choice. Challenging, though. Are you ready?" Marcus's face set with determination. "I have to be." The boy walked away toward the auditorium, his shoebox clutched against his chest like a shield. James stood frozen, watching him go. Victoria was staring at him with open confusion. "That was extremely generous of you, Mr. Rivers, though I have to say you're setting a concerning precedent. If we start accepting every James cut her off with a look that made her recoil. If you ever speak to a child that way again in my presence, I'll make sure you never work in this industry again. Are we clear?" Victoria's mouth opened and closed. Finally, she nodded, her face pale. James walked away before he said something he'd regret. He needed air. He needed to think. He'd just met his son for the first time, and the boy had no idea who he was. James had 3 hours before the competition started. 3 hours to decide what he was going to do with this information. 3 hours to figure out how to judge his own child's performance without revealing a secret that could destroy them both. He pulled out his phone and dialed a number he'd blocked years ago. It rang 4 times before a weak voice answered. "Hello?" Sarah. He'd recognize that voice anywhere, even diminished by illness. "It's James." Silence. Then, "Why are you calling me?" Her voice hardened despite its fragility. "Marcus is here. At the talent competition. He's registered to perform tonight." Another silence, longer this time. When Sarah spoke again, her voice cracked. "He's saved for a year. I told him it was too much, that he was too young, but he wouldn't listen. He thinks he's going to save me." James closed his eyes. "The surgery. How bad is it?" Sarah laughed bitterly. "Bad enough that my 10-year-old son is trying to win prize money to keep me alive." "Where were you, James? Where were you when he was born? Where were you when I got the diagnosis? Where were you when he started working before dawn to save quarters?" "I'm here now. 10 years too late." The line went dead. James stood in the empty hallway, his phone still pressed to his ear. She was right. He was 10 years too late. But maybe, just maybe, he could still do something that mattered. He'd judged hundreds of performers in his career. He'd launched stars and crushed dreams with equal professionalism. Tonight he'd have to judge his own son and do it fairly. Because if Marcus won on nepotism rather than merit, the boy would never forgive him. And James already had too much to answer for. The auditorium filled quickly. Parents and families packed the seats, cameras ready, expectations high. Backstage, Marcus stood apart from the other contestants. He had no parent fussing over his outfit, no coach giving last-minute advice. He stood alone with his shoebox at his feet and his hands clasped in front of him. The other kids gave him curious glances, but no one approached. He was clearly an outsider, clearly didn't belong. Marcus didn't seem to notice or care. His eyes were closed and his lips moved silently. Praying, maybe, or rehearsing lyrics. The competition began. One by one, the contestants took the stage. They were good, technically proficient, well-trained. A girl sang a flawless rendition of a classical aria. A boy did a pitch-perfect pop cover with choreography. The judges gave respectable scores. Polite applause followed each performance. James sat at the judges' table, his expression neutral, his scorecard in front of him. He judged each performance fairly, professionally, but his mind was elsewhere. His eyes kept drifting to the stage wing where Marcus waited. Finally, the MC called the last name. Our final performer of the evening is Marcus Williams, singing stand-up. The audience applause was tepid, distracted. Everyone was tired. It was late. This was just the preliminary round. Marcus walked onto the stage in his patched jeans and faded hoodie. Under the lights, he looked even smaller, even more out of place. Someone in the audience whispered, "Is that a contestant, or did a kid from the street wander in?" Laughter rippled through the crowd. James's hands clenched into fists. Marcus walked to the center mark and stood in front of the microphone. He didn't adjust it, didn't fidget, didn't show any sign of nervousness. He simply stood there, waiting for the room to quiet. The laughter died away. The whispers faded. In the silence, Marcus closed his eyes. Then he opened his mouth and began to sing. The first note cut through the auditorium like a blade. It was raw and powerful and achingly pure. No technique could produce that sound. It came from somewhere deeper, somewhere technique couldn't reach. Marcus sang about standing up when the world pushed you down. He sang about finding strength when you had nothing left. He sang about fighting for the people you loved, even when the odds were impossible. His voice cracked on the high notes, not from lack of skill, but from the weight of emotion behind every word. This wasn't a performance. This was a testimony. This was a child pouring out his soul in front of strangers because his mother's life depended on it. The audience sat transfixed. No one moved. No one whispered. Even the other contestants backstage had stopped talking and were staring at the monitors in disbelief. On stage, Marcus's face twisted with the effort of the high notes, his eyebrows drawing together, his mouth pulling tight. It was the exact expression James made when he sang, the exact expression James's father had made. Genetic memory written in the architecture of their faces. James felt tears streaming down his cheeks and didn't bother to wipe them away. The song built to its climax. Marcus's voice soared up impossibly high, impossibly strong. He sang the final line with his whole body, every muscle engaged, every ounce of strength poured into those last words. "I will stand up." The note held, pure and unwavering, filling every corner of the massive room. Then it faded into silence. For 3 heartbeats, nothing. Then the auditorium exploded. People leaped to their feet. The applause was deafening. Parents were crying. The other judges were standing, clapping wildly. James sat with his face in his hands, his shoulders shaking with sobs. Marcus stood on stage, blinking in confusion at the response. He had expected polite applause, maybe pity. He hadn't expected this. The standing ovation went on for a full minute. The MC had to shout to be heard over the noise. "Judges, your scores, please." One by one, the other judges held up their cards. 9.8, 9.9, 9.7. Then Victoria Chun. She held up her card with a tight smile. 7.5. The audience booed. Someone shouted, "Are you kidding me?" Victoria's face flushed, but she kept the card up. "Finally, James," he lowered his hands from his face. His eyes were red, his cheeks wet. He picked up his marker with a shaking hand and wrote on his scorecard. Then he held it up. 10. The audience roared approval. Marcus's average score, even with Victoria's sabotage, was the highest of the night. The boy had earned his spot in the finals. As Marcus walked off stage, James stood abruptly from the judges' table. He didn't know what he was going to say, but he needed to talk to his son. He pushed through the backstage door. Marcus was sitting on an equipment crate, his head in his hands, his whole body trembling with the aftermath of adrenaline. James approached slowly, carefully, like approaching a wild animal that might bolt. "Marcus," the boy looked up. His eyes were red-rimmed and exhausted. "You sang beautifully." Marcus's face crumpled. "Thank you, sir. I just hope it was enough." James sat down on the crate next to him, maintaining a respectful distance. "It was more than enough. That was one of the most powerful performances I've ever heard. Where did you learn to sing like that?" "My mom taught me when I was little." Before she got sick, Marcus wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "She used to sing all the time, in the kitchen, in the car, everywhere. She said music was free joy. You couldn't buy it and nobody could take it from you." James's chest ached. "That sounded exactly like Sarah. She sounds like a wise woman." Marcus nodded. "She is. She's the best person I know. That's why I have to save her. Marcus," James chose his words carefully, "you know that even if you win, even if you get the prize money, it might not be enough. Medicine is complicated. Sometimes even with money." The boy cut him off. "Don't. Everyone keeps saying that. The doctors, the nurses, everyone. They all have that look, like they're already planning her funeral. But I'm not giving up. As long as she's breathing, I'm fighting. That's what she'd do for me." James saw himself in that determination, saw the same stubborn refusal to accept defeat that had driven his own career. But where James had used that drive for fame and money, Marcus was using it for love. The difference was humbling. "Your mother's lucky to have you." Marcus looked at him directly. "Are you a father, Mr. Rivers?" The question hit like a physical blow. James opened his mouth, then closed it. How did he answer that? "Biologically, yes. Morally, no. It's complicated," he finally said. "Do you have kids?" "I have a son. But I'm not in his life." "Why not?"